Welcome out to King's Church once again. If we haven't met, my name is Matt. I'm one of the pastors here. And like Pastor Noah said, we're going to take some time and we're going to do something a little bit different today where we're going to have a conversation called History of the House. And our goal today is that we're going to kind of go backwards in time. We're going to talk about how our church started, the inception of our church, and how things have kind of grown and progressed. And we kind of want to just sit there in that moment and look at the things that God has done in our church leading up till now. And then at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about the future. And so we're excited about that. And one of the things that happens a lot of times, if you see someone in your life that's successful, is a lot of times we think to ourselves, I wish I could be in that position. But what we should do instead is do the hard work of saying, how did that person get there? Because no matter what industry you're in, no matter what vein of life you're in, wherever you're at in your life, if someone has tried and successfully accomplished something, most likely they've had challenges, they've had failures, they've learned lessons. And so part of today is we want to kind of go back through, talk about our story, hear some lessons that Pastor Noah has learned as we've kind of gone through this journey together as King's Church. And hopefully you'll get some little snippets, things that you can take home and learn from today as well. Sound good? How you doing?
I'm so good. You know,
That's
one
awesome.
of the biggest transformations over the 3 years has been your physical fitness. Your
That's
CrossFit journey has brought you to huge results. Well done, Matthew Lopresti. I'm proud of you. Good job. I know Nikki's proud of you too. Hey, okay. It's awesome. Hey, no, real quick, sorry. Just to echo, if you're like, did I come to church to hear this guy talk about his story for 35 minutes? No, we're going to talk about our story. And like he said, the lessons that we've learned, and we're going to make some highly practical points that you can apply to your life as well. So this isn't just kind of like story time with Noah and Matt. There's going to be some things that you'll learn through it as well. And we really do believe this. This church, if you consider this to be your church, or you're considering it to be your church, this is a great story for you to know because it becomes your church. This is our church. One of the things, and if you've been around, you know that I hate this, is if somebody comes to King's and they're like, King's is their home. But when we're in conversation, they say, man, your church on Sunday. I'm like, what? Our church. This is what we get to do together. So knowing our history, our story, our victories, our failures, our challenges, it's all part of who we are, our DNA, and what God is building through us. So I think it's going to be fun. It'll be exciting. We'll laugh, maybe cry a little bit, you know. See what gamut emotions we want to go on. Browns won, so that's good, you know.
Did we win, though?
Yeah.
I feel like we lost after.
Do you hear how barely anybody cheered? That's the sentiment
Browns
of
won.
that.
Kind of.
Any other Sunday, we won. Everybody like, yeah, that's awesome. It's like, we won with assault, you know. Like, how does that go?
Yeah. A little bit of violent crime at the end.
Miles Garrett praying for you, man. You always got a space here.
Yeah, I'm upset you did the workout thing. Now I feel weird about it, but, you know,
Sorry.
just wanted to be honest about that. I didn't ask him to say that, but kind of feels like between two ferns, you know what I'm saying? Like we're doing, yeah. Except for we're not as funny as
Zach Galifianakis?
We're not as funny as Zach Galifianakis. So, anyways, want to jump into this. Want to talk a little bit about the history of our house. And so, what I want to start with is I want to kind of hear a little bit about the story, just briefly, of you and Steph, how you met, got married, how you found your way to Faith Family, which is the church you were at before King's.
Yeah, so before I say that, I'm just going to give a heads up. Steph was supposed to be here today. That was the plan. We're going to do this together. And she's super pregnant and, been having, for real contractions the past couple days. So I have my phone on me. So if I keep looking down, it's not because I'm disinterested in what's going on here. I'm just seeing if there's a text that says, hey, I'm having a baby, which means I'm going to have to leave. And then you're going to tell a story the rest of the time.
Then at that point, it would just be story time with Matt. And you just do that.
Which would be awesome. You could get some CrossFit tips. That would be good.
Stop talking about that. Super awkward.
So here's a quick story. If you've been around, you've heard this before. I was born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, grew up there, ended up in Oklahoma at Bible school. And as I was doing my first year, my wife, she was coming to do her second year in Oklahoma. She did her first year over in Singapore. And we didn't meet at school, actually, little known fact, is I was working at Express clothing store in the mall. Holla at your boy. I was in Express with the 1MX shirts, and she walked in with her, I thought it was her boyfriend at the time, ended up being her brother, which now is funny because they look just like each other. But we started talking there in about June, July sometime, and became friends. Then fast forward several months in, Christmas banquet. There was like a Christmas banquet kind of ball thing that our school put on. and my roommate was actually planning to go with Steph. They had planned to go together, and then one day after school, I came home and I told my roommate, hey, you're not going with Steph anymore. I'm going to take her. And he's like, what? And so I interjected myself between both of them, and I took her to the Christmas banquet, and then we ended up, getting married. So moved up to Ohio. Not that night. Like, that was really fast.
Quick.
Lord, let that happen for me. No. We met, and then she moved back home after she graduated. I finished my second year in Oklahoma, moved back to Ohio, where her mom and dad pastor a church down in Canton. About 31 years they've been pastoring it now. They started it and pastored it this whole time. Great church. And we got married in July of 2005. And now we are 14 plus years married, about to be 3 kids in, and getting to pastor the best church in the world. That's our story. Life happens fast.
Yeah, so I want to just kind of start there. You're at Faith Family. You're there. I know you had said that, when you were serving at Faith Family, which is an amazing church in Canton, Ohio, decades of history of ministry they've done in that area. Pastor Noah and Steph's parents, his father-in-law and mother-in-law, pastor that church. And at that time, you were thinking, I'm probably going to take this church over. And then something switched. Something changed. You went from being in that trajectory where you thought, I'm going to take this church over, serve here, to feeling like God had started to birth something in you and Steph that he wanted to see come to fruition. So talk about that. Talk about that journey while you're at Faith Family, having that moment where God started to move you in that direction.
Yeah, so I think this is life. We all have dreams, hopes, visions, mission, like whatever that might be, whether it's career, relationship, family, school, like you just have these big aspirations and these hopes. And out of Bible school, obviously I went to Bible school because I felt like ministry was what God was calling me to for my vocation and a calling. So, you start to formulate what is it going to look like in the picture, and I want to do this and be a part of that. But when we were getting married, we were like, where should we go? And we didn't want to just assume because her mom and dad were pastors, like, well, that's easy. Let's just go to your mom and dad's church. We wanted to make sure it was right. So we took time and prayed and felt like God said, go back and serve and be a part of the church in whatever capacity they need. And here's the thing about your dream, your vision, your hope, whatever it might be for all of us, is that whatever God gives you, God opportunities are always preceded with the ability to serve. Like we want the dream to happen. We want that right now. But God doesn't tempt us, but he does test us. And there is a testing phase that you will go through and that I will go through for where God is leading us and where we want to get to in the vision that we see of saying, okay, how faithful can you be in this time? How faithful can you be in this area? So we had these dreams and these hopes. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea back in Bible school, just wanted to do something awesome. But then felt like God said, go and serve. So we served there. And it seemed like the natural progression would be, they would, whenever that time came, retire or, transition. And then me and Steph would take that over. But several years ago, we just started feeling like, I think we're supposed to do something, step out, start something, and kind of wrestled with that for a little bit and kind of kept it low key and then brought it to, our pastors, which are a highly complex relationship, it being my pastors, my in-laws, and my bosses, which is like, Maury Povich, that show kind of a thing. It's like all over. And then finally, eventually bringing it to them. But we were just feeling like, I think we're supposed to start something, not knowing exactly what it looked like, but getting that stirring and going for it.
So you went to your dad-in-law, father-in-law.
I said, Daddy.
Hey.
Daddy.
So you went to Daddy, and what was that like? You came and you're like, hey, I feel like we're supposed to do this. And what did he say to you?
Yeah, so something to know about my father-in-law, one of the meekest, humble, kindest, not an aggressive or intimidating bone in his body, and having worked for them for, over a decade at that time, and he's a very hands-off, like if you feel like you want to do something, he's like, encourages you, like, go for it, I'll create space for you to experiment and try, and da-da-da-da. So I thought going into this conversation, like, it's going to be a repeat of the previous decade of him being like, yeah, go for it. So we sat down in his office, and he's like, yeah, no, I don't think so. And I was like, I didn't know what to do. Like, at that moment, I was like, he's like, no, I don't think so, at least not yet. Just doesn't seem, and I'm sitting there, and I'm trying to, like, process this now because personal conviction, I believe it's biblical, is that that you want to honor whoever you're called to serve under, and they have wisdom that you need to listen to. So the Bible says that there's wisdom in the counsel of many. And you might see this in your life, that several different people might see something in you or about you or something you're involved with, and they might be like saying these things to you, and you're kind of trying to ignore it or avoid it. Case in point, you're dating somebody. You're dating this guy, and you go to your girlfriends, and all your girlfriends just hate him. He's no good. He's mean to you. Da, da, da. And you're like defending him all the time. He's awesome. You don't really know his heart. He's different when we're alone. All of this stuff. And then 3 months into it, you break up with them and you go back to your girlfriend. Like, you were right. He's miserable. Da, 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 da. And if you would have listened to the wisdom in the counsel of many, you would have prevented those 3 months of, insane relationship. When people speak into your life, you have to have a level of trust and honor that you listen to it, even if it's an answer you don't want. So when he said no, I had to think, okay, I want to honor him as my pastor, trust his counsel. I don't like what he's saying. What am I going to do with this? So I had to sit with it for a little while. I had to process it. I wasn't like, okay, cool, see you later. It resonated, and I've shared that story before and some specifics that go along with it. But I think that we always want the yeses in our life. We love the yeses. We love the open doors. We love going through it. But what's most formative in our life are the no's. I think the no's and the not yets. I've been praying, I've been asking, I've been trying, and it just seems like every door is closed. And instead of getting frustrated or giving up, let that begin to form your character. Let that begin to form patience. Let that begin to form resolve. Like, let your no's and your not yets not be something that discourages you, but that empowers you and builds you up. So it was a no, not yet, and then I had to sit with it for a little bit and kind of navigate through that. But obviously we're here now, so that no turned into a go for it.
Yeah, and
or I completely rebelled and we don't talk anymore. It's one of those things.
He doesn't come here ever. Just kidding. One of the things that I know it really drew me to want to serve on this team was hearing that story, because I heard one pastor say it this way, that your character is revealed when you get a no, and it reveals who you are when you respond to what that no is. And for me, I know there's been moments in my life where I've gotten a no, and I've try to get around that no, and try to make it a yes. And so hearing that, you were able to get a no and wait for several years until that became a yes. I think it was really powerful, and I think we're standing in the blessing of that obedience, because there's so many connections we'll talk about in the next few minutes that we could have potentially missed if you would have gone with the timeline that you wanted instead of God's. And so I think that's really powerful, but also that's kind of a crazy thing if you think about it. You had an opportunity to take over an amazing, life-giving church with decades of history in it, and you set that aside in order to pursue and take a risk to start something completely fresh, new, in a different place that you'd never really lived before. And that's a big risk. And so I want you to kind of talk about that, but also talk about what God had placed inside you. What was the church that you felt like you and Steph wanted to see, that you're like, we can't stay here, we have to go, and we have to do this thing because God's calling us to create this space? Yeah.
Let me just add on to that last one, too. We live culturally in a time where it says, don't take no for an answer. Keep going, keep working. No, take no for a really good answer. That's okay. Sometimes don't try and force it into a yes. Don't try to work around it. Sometimes the no is important. Sometimes the no is necessary in that season of life that you're in. And we always, I think it's the American spirit. We always want to fight and prove wrong. And I get there's times for that, but there's also times where there's just wisdom in the no. So somebody needs that this morning. You feel like you're trying to prove everybody wrong, work around it, fight for it, break your way through the door, make the no a yes. And listen, you might turn it into a yes, but it will be a miserable yes, because you might be trying to get somewhere too early, or trying to do something where God has a different spot for you, but you're trying to turn the no into a yes. So let the no sometimes just be a no and be okay with it and content with it, because it's a benefit. So yeah, feeling that, there's risk in it. There's always risk in faith. There's always uncertainty. There's fear. What does this look like? We would talk about this with my wife. She hates cold weather. So I knew, and we'll get to this probably in a minute, but feeling like Cleveland and coming up north, even an hour up north, was going to have to be a God thing. Stephanie would move to the south, to Florida, or to the West Coast without Jesus. If I was hey, we're going to Florida to start a church, or California, she'd be like, cool, I don't want to pray about it. I'm in. Just get me out of the cold weather. So for me, the moment she came after we've been talking about this in the kitchen and was like, okay, I'm in, I knew it was a God thing for her to just, you know, like, well, it's like an hour away, but for her, that's a big deal, moving up closer to the lake and the snow, being pastoring here and driving up here. All of that was a big thing. So there was that uncertainty of like, is Steph going to be okay with it? And then we just, you know, what does it look like? I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so to me, Cleveland and Milwaukee are very similar cities. It's got this Midwest kind of gritty kind of DNA to it, and I don't want to move anywhere else. Like, I'm a Midwest kid, and I've told my wife this since the day we met, through and through. All 4 seasons, I'm in it. Like, this is my spot. This is my zone. So we just knew we wanted to move here and embrace the spirit of what like Northeast Ohio is. So we started it, wanted to see a church that really impacted people, had great gatherings, but really made a lasting, tangible difference in the city and the community around us. And a church that looked like heaven, and the expression and the people that came and the experiences that we had is something that we really were like feeling like this is who and what we want to be.
Talk more about wanting a church that looks like heaven, like that multicultural spirit that you felt like God had called you and Steph to create.
Yeah, we were, you know, in the process of building the team, and we'll get to that in a minute too, but I think at the forefront of what does this look like, we live, obviously, I don't know if you know this or not, there's some tension in the culture with race and things around that. You may have heard a story or two here and there, but that was a joke that fell right. It's right there. Can you pick that up, Allie, and just pick that? Thank you. Well, okay. This is going strong. And what I didn't want to do is ever be a church that avoided it. And like, well, we don't talk about that stuff, but be aware of it and say, okay, what does a healthy, strong, vibrant church look like? I think diversity is a divine thing. I think healthy churches that are able to be diverse, meaning like in the location there is a multitude of expressions of people. The church should reflect the area that it's in. So we wanted to be intentional with that. We wanted to see diversity happen. We wanted to see ethnic diversity. We wanted to see generational diversity, knowing that I'm in my 30s, so there's a tendency that we could lean young and saying, okay, how do we constantly create space and pray in and believe for the older generations to come and feel like they're just as integral of a part of our church as well. And by God's grace, we've been able to see that happen over the past couple of years.
It's awesome. So you're at Faith Family. You feel like you called to this, you got to know, then eventually it turned into a yes. You feel like there's this vision that God has given you and staff, and then you had to decide on a location. And you eventually landed on Lakewood in Cleveland, Ohio. What was that journey like for you to kind of navigate where God wanted you to end up with this church?
Yeah, so Milwaukee, Cleveland, the similarities, talked about that, so that's awesome. Because to me, it was like a natural thing. When we started to feel like we're going to plant a church, I was like, I'm in for Cleveland. I want to do that. It just seemed supernatural. But funny story is while I was thinking about that one day, mowing the lawn, processing, like, God, is it really Cleveland? Is that really where we want to go and start? Because we also knew that whatever we started, we wanted to have multiple expressions of it. So whatever you want to call it, multi-site, multi-campus, multi-churches, a network, whatever it was. We wanted to do that. So it was like, where's the city and where in this city do we start? So I started with the city, like, is Cleveland right? So I'm mowing the lawn, and I'm having this conversation with God while I'm mowing the lawn, and I'm listening to a podcast. I'm like, I don't know, God, is Cleveland the right city? I don't want to just assume, because I like Cleveland, it's like Milwaukee, and there's similarities, and that's kind of where, I don't want to, is Cleveland it? The very next words in the podcast teaching, the guy goes, Cleveland. And I stopped the lawnmower, and I'm like, what? And he goes on to tell this story about like Cleveland, Tennessee, and Cleveland, Ohio, and this combination. And I'm like, oh, that's crazy. You know, that's wild.
How did you know it wasn't Cleveland, Tennessee?
I didn't. This could all be wrong.
Yeah. We're in the wrong city.
And
you're at the wrong church.
In the wrong spot. So there was that. So okay, taking that, and then it was, where do we start? So where would we first start in Cleveland, and then in the area, in the region? So we would come up here for lunch, and when I say up here, I just mean all around the city and the area, and come up, pray through, drive around, just kind of sense, like, I don't know what feels right. Where do we go? I remember one time, my wife and at that time daughter, because we only had one kid, they were out of town, so I drove up all the way. I think I started at Painesville. Started in Painesville, and I drove, like not on the freeway, like the city streets, all the way to the west side. Got a little sketchy for a little bit there in some neighborhoods. Driving through, just praying and saying, God, where do you want us to start? And I'm not like, I don't know. Am I an emotional person? No, I'm not. I'm not like a highly emotional person, but I remember listening to...
Like, I wish you were a little bit more emotional.
Oh.
It'd make me...
Well, that's...
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with that right now, so... Driving through, and I started driving through Lakewood, listening to a teaching. I still remember what it was, who it was, and she's preaching, and the communicator I'm listening to, and she's talking about this message being a generation that sees God. That I driving through Lakewood and just like start tearing up in my truck. Like I'm just like, oh man, like my heart's just like is just alive unto God in this moment. So I was like, okay, maybe it's Lakewood. So I started telling Steph, she's like, yeah, I like that area. I like when we go up there. Maybe it's Lakewood. So I started fleecing God. If you know what that is, it's like saying, God, give me a sign. Like, show me a sign that this is right. That whole lawnmower thing, that was pretty cool. Could you do that again? So fleecing God. So backstory real quick. I'm working at Faith Family, doing some research for Easter service that we have coming up, looking at different inspiration ideas, other churches, and I'm on this church that's in Colorado. I heard of them that day. I'm scrolling through their website, and they have multiple locations. And while I'm scrolling, I'm thinking about Lakewood, and I scroll down the page, and the first campus that pops up from this church in Colorado is Lakewood campus. And I'm like, okay, okay, God, I see like something there. And then we go to our church plant training in, he thinks I should be in Cleveland, Tennessee too. He's like, get out of here. We're in church planting training in Florida, and we have to get off on this exit. And the exit that we have to get off on is Lakewood in big letters with a directional arrow pointing that way. And then like a month later, I'm in my bedroom. I look over at the fan that's sitting on our floor, and the company that makes the fan says Lakewood in the middle of it. And I'm like, okay, like I think I got it. Like I think that's good. Which here's a side note for you to take in your personal lives, for all of us to apply, to not take confirmation from God as coincidences. Don't to just say, like, that's so crazy. That keeps popping up. That's so wild. Maybe that's God speaking to you. Sometimes we're praying and we want God to answer it in this magnificent, miraculous way. And it might be through the subtleties of websites, floor fans, street signs, whatever it might be, that God has a way of speaking to give confirmation. So we started in Lakewood, and here we are. You know, that was it. Thanks to fans in Florida.
Fans in Florida, that's good. Yeah. You're really good at alliteration. I feel like I've never alliterated once in my life, and I wish I could.
It's okay. I'll teach you.
Just do it in everyday conversation, and I love it. Fans in Florida. Yeah. So you start moving towards Lakewood. You start that process, and one of the things that I've loved about your and Steph's vision for Kings that really drew Nikki and I here was that you've always said from the beginning that you want to be a church where it's not just two people out front leading the way, but a community of people that come together and link arms and do something significant for the kingdom of God. That's always been what it's about. Not just about you and Steph being elevated, but about everybody being on this team and doing something together. And so at that point, the church was you and Steph. That was your vision. God had planted it there, but you had to go through this process of putting yourself out there, taking that risk to try to meet people and all that. So talk about like the formation of our team and the God moments that happened and the stories that kind of brought the team initially together that was going to launch Kings.
Yeah. Whatever you and I do in life, relationships are always essential. The way that God has it designed, the assignment, if I can say it that way, whatever the assignment you have in your life to be a mom, a dad, to run a business, to work in this career, to go to school, assignment always is dependent on alignment. Like how your assignment and alignment go hand in hand, and how you align yourself is dependent on who you align yourself with. So the right people. It's not just about where you're going, it's who you're going there with. You ever been on a road trip, but the wrong people are in the car that made the road trip and the whole trip really miserable? But then you could go to a really crappy location, but have the right people in the car, and you're like, dude, that was a fun trip. That was awesome. It's the people that you're with. So we knew that the team that we wanted and needed, it was so crucial. So we would pray and just believe in God for the right people. And every church planner, and I think this, let me talk specifically on my story because I know it. You know, if you're an entrepreneur in the business world, maybe it's a little different. But for a church planner and in conversations I have with other pastors, there's always like three big fears with starting a church. One, will we have enough money to do it? Two, will we find a location? And three, will people actually show up? And I think everybody that plants a church deals with one, maybe two of those. Maybe somebody deals with all three of them. I wasn't really concerned about money, mostly because I just had faith and belief that Steph and I had lived such a generous and a sacrificial giving life that in our own personal lives, that God was going to take care of our church. And we're a testament to the faithfulness of God doing that and being a church that has the opportunity to be very, very generous. So finances weren't in, the building wasn't it. We had moved past, there's a crazy story, we don't have time to get into that, but we had, the organization that we planted with says, hey, you know, they gave you a timeline, like you should have a building locked up by this time, so many months out before you plant the church. And we had passed that timeline with no building in sight, but was just never worried about it. But my concern was people. Are people going to show up? Are people actually going to do this? Because it's kind of hard to have a church with no people. So it was like, are people going to want to be a part of this? So the word started getting out there. We started to meet people. And, you know, there was some cool things that happened. You know, people will ask, knowing how big the church that we came from, it's like, man, you probably had a bunch of people come with you, like, you know, like 100 people like move. And no, like I think we had like just over 20 people from Faith Family, which is still a great number, that came, and some really great leaders that this church has been built on. But the other 75% of the team, we just met kind of just through relationships. And God works through relationships. You need the right people in your life, and those relationships open up doors. And I was talking in first service, there was like really a lot of people that are here since the beginning. You can trace your kind of stream back to one of these three relationships. It was a conference happened. We have time for this? Should I tell this story?
Yes, you have time.
We had a conference at our church every year. It was a youth and young adult conference. The last night of that conference, they called Steph and I up, and everybody prayed over us because we were getting ready to start Kings the next year. After that service that night, I was down front, and this guy walks down. His name is Joel Simpson, and Joel walks down, and he introduces himself and says, hey, me and my wife are kind of in transition right now, trying to find like a church home. We're up in the Cleveland area. Saw what, you know, them pray over you. That's really cool. And he says this, maybe like Kings is it. Maybe we'll check it out sometime. It's one of the first times I was this direct with somebody who I met 30 seconds ago. I said, why wouldn't you do it with us? And he's like, probably thinking in his head, because I just met you 30 seconds ago. So why wouldn't you do it with us? And that started a great relationship, and Joel and Anna have been instrumental in so many things with Kings. And then he introduced me to you. So me and you got together at a Barnes & Noble. You had reached out to me at a previous time, but I was ignoring your phone calls.
He ghosted me on Instagram. So I DM'd him, no response. So Joel's like, I'm going to this conference. I'm just going to go find him, and I'm just going to ask him and be like, dude, you got to meet my friend Matt. In your defense, though, I think there's like a separate part of Instagram where like a DM gets sent over there. At least that's what I was told.
From somebody that you're not already friends with.
Yeah.
It's the secret DMs.
Yeah. Anyways,
those darn
I was
secret
ghosted,
DMs.
but I finally met you.
Yeah. So we got together, me and you first met, then we ended up doing dinner, you and Nikki and Steph and I, and we connected, and then through you and Joel, then we met Philip and Jackie at Fount. Incredible people. Shout out Fount, best leather bags in the world. You get that? And they were so kind and humble and generous that they opened up their Fount space to us to have all these interest meetings of like people to come and hear about our church. And we did that for 3 months, 2 meetings a month, 6 of them we did there. And people like started coming to like hear about the church. And how many of you have been here since day one? Like you were in the launch team meetings at Fount, like interest. Shout out. Yeah. Oh, geez. It was awesome. It was fun, hot, sweaty. It was crazy. Kind of the story of our church a little bit. So, you know, probably should add context and clarity to that statement. But anyways, so we started building the team. Alignment and assignment go hand in hand.
Yes.
You gotta make sure you're doing your life right.
So you're building this team. We have this team of people now, and we finally get to the point to where we're able to launch this church, and we're going. And to go back to your vision, you and Steph felt like you wanted to create this space where there could be a multicultural church that looks like heaven, multi-generational. And so just hit a couple points like in the first year or two, where you felt like there was a moment where you sat back and you said, I feel like this is happening. Like we didn't want it to just be us. We wanted it to be a team of people, and I can see it happening now because of this moment in the first year or two.
Yeah, so to the full transparency, the fear of like, will anybody do this? The people was my concern. And to be totally honest, like on Sunday mornings, there are still times that I wake up and I have that still right there. I think in my head, driving to church, this is the day. This is the day nobody shows up to church. This is the day that everybody calls it in. And I think all of us have those giants in our life that just seem to kind of be there, that you have to process and trust God through and all that kind of stuff. But so we started it. What was the question?
So you were about to tell the story, if I can read your mind a little bit, about the moments that you feel like that you saw God's vision coming to fruition,
right.
And you were going to tell the story next about the worship night.
Yes. So
you were
then,
going
in the interest meetings that we were having at Fount, the RNC was happening. There was, in that moment, if you remember this a couple years ago, there was, like, it was just palpable, like the racial tensions. There was some stuff going on with the police, all like the political climate, all of this stuff was going on in the city. So we were like, let's just do a worship night. Like, let's have a night where we go downtown. And Philip and Jackie were so kind again to open their space, and we're like, let's just do a worship night here and like see if anybody comes. Let's see if anybody comes to a worship night put on by a non-church. That was pretty much what we were doing. Like, do people want to come out to a worship night? Who's putting it on? I don't know, this church that doesn't exist yet. So we're like, well, we'll see how this works out. So we did it, and people started coming. And I have some pictures of it. You just look down kind of the room, and in that moment I thought, this might work. Like, this could work. There could be something to this. It can happen. Yeah.
And then you're also thinking to yourself, we want to see this multicultural church. And, there's this old saying that's not specifically true about every church, but it can generally be true, is that Sunday mornings are still the most segregated hour of the week. And so you had this vision where you wanted to see a multicultural church, a diverse church. And so what are some ways that you feel like we've been able to see that actually become a reality for us?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like it all started in prayer early on when me and Steph would pray about the kind of church that we ask God, would you let us pastor this kind of a church? Would you bring and build this kind of a church? That was always top of the list. God, let it look like heaven. Let it be an expression of the kingdom, results of the city. So first it all started in prayer, and then authenticity, because I don't think you can try to formulate that and try and like represent something that you're really not. So I think it had to be authentic, and I think that, especially I can only speak for myself in that, but like upbringing, that was the house that I lived in. My parents are white, in case you didn't know, but our house was always, my parents' best friend were always like non-white, Puerto Rican, African American. Like, that was just kind of the culture that I grew up in. So, and I knew appreciating and valuing Dr. King so much in that statement that I didn't want our church to look like that. And I can't force it. Can't make it happen, but we could try to be authentic with it and try to listen and try to observe. And again, personal, like for me, it started with personal formation. Some of my most favorite things to read still are books with Dr. King's sermons in them, and African American voices that really have shaped the way that I see things and process things, and the Cornel West and the Bishop Joseph Garlingtons and the theologians like Howard Thurman. And to me, my favorite communicator in order, the only one that can get me to cry, laugh, and dance and get Pentecostal all in the same time is Bishop T.D. Jakes. So like, that's like, that it's been so formative for my life. And I think this, and I don't think I have the full authority or experience to speak on it, but I think some year it's forming, and it'll be a part of our story. And I want to be careful how I say this. I think church is better. I think life is better, but we're talking about church. I think church is better when we acknowledge and recognize the beauty of diversity and say we need white voices, black voices, Latin voice. We need all of the voices to speak, because you get a full representation of the kingdom of heaven, not just a skewed one. So it's very important.
So you were aware of the need to create that diversity, and so you took some steps to intentionally bring people in and listen to them.
Yeah, we would do like one-on-one conversations. I would try to be really like honest and authentic and ask questions to people one-on-one. But then we also did something. It wasn't like publicized. It was just like a private kind of thing that me and you got together at our old office. We did something called Table Talk. We had probably about 20 to 25. It was me and you were the only white people around the table. And it was all just our African-American brothers and sisters sitting there having an honest conversation about race. Not for me to give opinions, but to listen. Because one of the challenges in our world is too many people are speaking about things they don't know anything about. And they're trying to say, this is what happened, this needs to happen. It's like, just be quiet and just listen. And that meeting wasn't like, we're gonna do this to like create some program or some initiative. It was for, hey, as a 37-year-old white pastor, help me understand how to pastor you well. Like, let me into your world experience, help me understand, and to just really listen. And we've been able to do that in that setting, and then individually, and I think it helps because we need one another. Like, we need that to happen. We need all of those voices, you know. Yo necesito mis hermanos y mis hermanas, you know, like we need to like make that, like keep that going and stuff, you know, so.
Nice.
My Spanish is shaky.
That was good.
I'm working on it, guys.
I know everything you just said. I don't know anything you just said. So, you know, we've seen that happen. We've seen that come into reality.
Su es muy guapo.
Oh,
Hey.
see. That's all I got. That felt good. I was there. Anyways. So we've seen this happen. We are still growing in this, and you know, it's becoming a part of what our DNA and our culture is, and it's amazing to see that vision has come into reality over the first few years. And we were in the Masonic Temple, which was the hot, sweaty part of our church history. And I always joke with people in our church, like no matter what I do, I always find myself in a hot, sweaty room with people in our church, whether it's an office space or a place for a meeting or the air conditioning randomly turns off here. It's just like, man, we always just find ourselves in hot, sweaty rooms. But it's one of the best parts of our story, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Moving
Moving
on.
on.
Who you are. Your environment inevitably shapes your DNA, good or bad. You could have good experiences or bad experiences, but you can always take the positive from them and be better for it. So we look at the Masonic days and we're like, whew, that was some crazy, crazy days, but it shaped who we are. Our team, if you're part of our team, there's a level of grit and hard work and like get it done, and we're all in, and camaraderie and unity, and so much of it was shaped by the environment that we came from working through the temple. And those hot summer days, when you show up, you want to talk about like nobody coming to church, that fear? I was like, in the middle of July and August, I was like, for sure nobody's coming to church.
There was no air conditioning, so if it was 98 outside, it was 100 inside.
And then we had this bright idea of getting these swamp foggers that made it feel like the Amazon rainforest in there. That was
I'm sure that's also a great story, but we have to keep moving, so I'm just going to
keep moving. Yeah, it shaped us who we are. It was great. So don't despise your environments and experiences. Maybe it wasn't great. Maybe your past has been some type of way, but take the positive from it and let it shape you into who you're becoming in the future.
That's so amazing. So, sorry, we're on a time clock. So, you know, at first our church was like, we were just trying to figure out how to not mess up the next Sunday when we first started.
We're still trying to figure that out. But
yeah. We're still slightly better than it, but than we were. But at the beginning, people were like, do we have small groups? Like, no, I can't even think about small groups. I don't even know what small groups are. All I'm trying to do is figure out how to not mess up next Sunday. But eventually our church grew, and we developed more ways for people to come into community and different things like small groups and all these other ministries we have. So just talk about some things that you've loved to see grow in our church, as well as some series that we've had, some sermon series that you feel like were formative for our church.
Yeah, some of the practical things, and there's tons of personal stories that we could get into, but for sake of time and you know, really pushing this, Matt, thanks a lot. I thought this was going to be meaningful. I'm not going to share those. Let me give you some highlights. Our kids ministry is number one. I love our kids ministry from day one. The team that serves, the amount of kids that come and are a part of our kids ministry is incredible. We always wanted to be a church that valued family and seeing kids raise and understand who Jesus is. So that's awesome. Shout out to the King's Kids teams, always doing an incredible job. Love you, appreciate you, you're awesome. And then even this past year, getting to start junior high ministry, that was great. The amount of money that we've been able to give away as a church to help people. We're in the middle of the 30 and 10, where we're giving $30,000 away over 10 weeks, and that's on top of what we already give. But what you don't know, what you're about to know right now, is in the past couple of weeks, we'll also have given, on top of everything else, another $15,000 away to different church plants that are getting ready to plant in the next couple of months. So the opportunity to be generous and to see that come to fruition has been awesome. It's been incredible. Formative series. We did one about 2 years ago, What Difference Does God Make? And I'm a skeptical person by nature. Grew up highly charismatic, Pentecostal, that and love and believe all of that still. But I also have kind of just this inquisitive skepticism about me. So I felt like you couldn't always ask those questions maybe in a church setting, because it was like, just believe, just believe, just believe. And I'm like, that's not good enough. I have all of these doubts. And I wanted to see if we could create space and room for doubt, to be a church where you can explore and navigate faith and don't have to believe it all just to be able to belong here and be on that journey with Jesus. So we did that in What Difference Does God Make? And I think that helped a lot of people and kind of set sail of saying, okay, this is a safe place where I don't have to believe everything. I'm on a journey. I'm leaning in and doing that, which has been so important and vital for us, because as the pastor, I wanted to be a church that took these two worlds and brought them together: space for skepticism and empowerment of the Spirit. and say we can have both. They can both coexist, and they can both be meaningful, and they can both be powerful. And one of the things coming up in 2020 with the skepticism is that we're going to jump in full bore to something called Alpha, where Alpha is a set of these dinner meetings for people that are not Christians, that are like, is there more to life? The big questions on life for people to come, have a meal, unpack the questions, not to try to have somebody preach a message to them. It's not a church service. It's creating an on-ramp for your coworkers, your friends, your family, yourself, your neighbors to come and say, hey, I'm wondering if there's more of the big questions of life in a safe space that you can direct them to as they eat a meal, as we navigate through what Alpha is, and it's a several-week course, class, time together, dinner parties that are going to be really, really incredible. So pairing that this upcoming year, which is the desire to create space for doubt, and then the empowerment of the Spirit. And then real quick, another series would be beginning of this past year, Pace. Just talking about pace, learning to live a healthy rhythm, slowing down. What does peace look like in our life? How do we follow after that, especially in a culture where there's just so much? And for our church that's grown so fast in such a short amount of time, making sure we don't get caught up in the hype and all of this kind of stuff and still are taking care of ourselves. So pace was really, really important.
It's so good. And it's been amazing to see both of those series that were so formative in our church become a part of the DNA of our church in so many ways. We've done Sabbath Sunday this year where we just took a Sunday off. And we just didn't do anything but just enjoy our families and friends. And with what difference does God make developing pathways for people to come and experience and explore faith and just have that opportunity to just say, hey, I don't know if I believe this, but I'm here to figure it out. And we've tried to create that space. And it's been so amazing to see how God has brought the vision that he put in you and Steph's heart to reality. And now we're this community of people who it's not just a couple people out front, but a community that's locked arms to make a difference in the world in so many ways. So, and that's because of you. All of you have been a part of this community. So thank you for being here. Give yourselves a hand for being a bunch of ballers. So, as we close, just give us a picture into what God is doing now. And what do you feel like God is calling us into next? Maybe just talk a little bit more about Alpha and what that is.
Yeah. I think now it's been the same prayer from the beginning for me is, God, whatever you put in our hands, let us steward it well. Help us to approach it with a heart of wisdom. I've shared this multiple times before. I feel like I have two responsibilities as the pastor. One is to obey God. Two is to serve our church well in whatever capacity is needed. So I think the now is just taking, again, what we have just 3 years in and say, God, let this be healthy. We never wanted to be a big church. We wanted to be a healthy church. Let us be healthy and intentional and a space for people to navigate and to grow in that. And with Alpha coming up, with this Heart for the House, we've done this every year since we started the church. We'll do this series. We do a one-time a year special offering. It's the Heart for the House offering where we don't even ask you to give. It's not like, hey, pray how much you should give. What we just say is ask God if you should give. And say, God, would you have me give anything? If he says no, then you don't give. If he says yes, then just say, God, how much? And what's the amount that you'd have me give? And we usually give towards different initiatives. And this upcoming year, we have a couple of different things that we need to purchase and some things that we're preparing for opportunity and expansion and some outreach things that we'd really love to be a part of this upcoming 2020, but also Alpha being not just a side thing that we do as a church, but a staple for what we do as a church, and being intentional with creating an environment for people that have questions, that are far from God, that don't know, but are inquisitive about it, to be able to come and to sit for about 8 weeks, have a meal around a table in community with people in a safe place where nobody's preaching to them, nobody's trying to give them all these final answers, just let them explore and navigate through those big questions of life. So for us, 2020 is that. Again, some outreach opportunities we're excited about. And then also planning out the 2020 calendar. Pretty excited about some things we're going to experiment this week or this year with when it comes to discipleship and spiritual maturity. How do we really begin to know God even more? Like Paul says in the scripture, how do our roots grow deep down into Jesus? And being intentional as a church to look at the 2020 calendar and having these things planned out. I'll give you a heads up on this already. There's several more Sabbath Sundays that are coming up. Just the opportunity to value rest and, people that don't do church or take time off church, that's like an anomaly. But for us, as much as we love Sundays is just a small part of what we believe we're called to. So we'll be unpacking that more in the months to come, and more opportunities to serve and to help people. There's we've been able to help so many stories that for privacy reasons or just we just don't have time, don't share, but that you get to be a part of. And I know one specific, there's a family, and over the better part of the past 2 years, year and a half, just fallen on a really hard time. There's some medical stuff that happened that they didn't see, got small kids, and they're our family, they're our community. It was like, man, we can't not do anything. So we've been able to take care of housing for them for the better part of the year. We were able to pay off their car for them. So that was a thing they didn't have to worry about. Provide resources and meals and diapers and all of that. And looking for opportunities where we can't do everything for everybody, but we can do some stuff, at least in this season, for some, and be intentional. Hopefully that grows and grows. And we really, I want people to know our church not because we have great Sundays. That's cool, and I think that could be a part of it. I want people to be able to drive down a city block and look at the houses that have been renewed and restored and say, Kings was here. I want school systems to be turned around because Kings served. I want neighborhoods and communities and regions to be better, because that's what the kingdom of God is. It's not far off in heaven. It's that its kingdom comes down now for the renewal of people and the renewal of the city, and saying, look at what a church got to do and leave a legacy for our kids and generations to come and really see a church that impacts and makes a true and genuine difference. Not just on Sundays. Again, Sundays are great. I love Sundays. Sundays are awesome. But Sundays are just a small part of what we're called to be as individuals and as a body of Christ. Is that a good answer?
I'm in.
Was that emotional enough?
Yeah.
Should I start crying?
Where do I sign up?
Okay.
That's a joke. I'm
Cool.
already signed up. You probably know that.
Hey, so with that, thanks for hanging out with us. Hopefully there's some practical things that you see that you can apply to your own life through the story of Kings. You're excited about where we are, where we're going. If you're kind of navigating, like, is this a part of the church that I want to be a part of or I want to call home? Hopefully this helped kind of give some more clarity to that. But we're just thankful that you're here and excited for what God's done and where he's headed. And I would encourage you to do this at some point. I'm not going to say you have to do it today, although the Browns don't play, so you got a free afternoon probably. So at some point, go home and actually sit down with a journal and write out your story. All the things that God's brought you through, your journey in life, and then begin to see the moments of God's faithfulness and reflect back on those, because it does something for our souls, and it's so important and so vital.